Hey y'all, welcome to the Babes Only Women Support Line. Thank y'all for joining us, for tuning in with us. Originally, we did intend this to be kind of more like a collaborative discussion in a Zoom call, but we had no RSVP, which is totally okay too, because we're going to do this in 2 weeks. And we hope that by like seeing how me and Bianca engage around this topic, maybe folks will feel comfortable engaging or, talking in 2 weeks when we do this again on July 24th. So I'll let Bianca go ahead and introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself.
All right. It's all formal. I'm sorry, I'm a little awkward. You'll see that. So obviously I'm Bianca, aka Bodacious Bruja. I'm a tarot reader. I do spiritual work, herbal work, and by night, I guess, and then by day, I'm
Lady of the night.
Bodacious comes out
The
at
freaks
night.
come out at night.
Yes. And by day, I put on my rape crisis counseling hat. And I'm a case manager at Resilience. So, that brings us
topic.
to
Here. I'm Ashley, and by night I go by DJ Mami. And so during the day, I do a lot of curating and project managing with Babes Only. And Bianca's my best friend, my roommate. You're literally in you're in our home. Welcome to our home. And these are conversations. Today we're going to be talking about sexual assault, but sexual assault in a very, broad term. I feel like this conversation is going to go very organically, and you're going to see a snippet of how, me and Bianca have a lot of conversations like these in our own kitchen, and we thought, I thought with my ability to curate and bring people together on a platform, and Bianca's extensive knowledge in in doing this work around sexual assault, I thought, what better time than now to bring this together and have a real discussion about this. And, we'll go into some of our inspiration behind this conversation, but it is something we're seeing a lot more, not just in our own personal lives, but we're seeing it on TV. We're hearing about it in, different people's perspectives. And so I just really wanted to open up the floor to talk about that. And I mean, I'm sure, like I said, this was supposed to be a Zoom call, but we're also going to post this. And so if you feel like you want to contribute anything in the comments, if you have a response to something we're talking about, go ahead and put it in the comments, and maybe we'll talk about it in 2 weeks when we do this again. Mm-hmm. So where should we start? What should we start with?
And also knowing, too, I don't know why this just came to my mind, but also remembering that I guess the intention is for folks to come into the space as they wish, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, if you want to, speak and you want to show your face or your name and speak, you can. Or you can just kind of show up anonymously and listen and mm-hmm. maybe write in the chat box. Like, we understand, it's a sensitive topic, obviously. And
for sure.
People are going to be ready or willing or trusting us, to whatever level.
And we also, we called it a women's support line, and it's supposed to center survivors, but a thing Bianca brought up earlier was, maybe not everyone identifies as a survivor, maybe a lot of folks don't, maybe if that's not what they identify as, this might seem like an alienating experience, and I mean, I guess, that's why I wanted to continue and have this talk, even if it's just us, to show that, it's nothing, super stuffy and formal, this isn't going to be, this really, it can be, it has the potential, the power to be, but it also can just be a place to talk about it in a very, as detailed or as generally as people want. So, yeah. I would say, we were talking about it right before I hit the record button, but we've been quarantine life, we've been binge watching some shows. Bianca got that HBO Max 7-day free trial.
7 day, I got 4 more days.
We got 4 more days. And 2 of the shows that Bianca ended up binge watching one, and I was with her the other one, did focus and have topics around women experiencing sexual assault. And so it's very interesting to see it portrayed in this fictional way. And we'll go into detail about both shows, but you binge watched, what's the one with Michaela Cole?
It's I May Destroy You.
I May Destroy You. So why don't you give us a rundown of
what
happened. Not what the plot. What's the premise?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and from the trailer, I think it's pretty clear. The plot is she is her character experiences a stranger sexual assault by a stranger. So essentially, and it's a drug facilitated sexual assault. So her drink is spiked, and a stranger attacks her, unfortunately, and she doesn't remember until a little bit later. So she has to keep kind of like she's having flashbacks, clearly maybe having like PTSD, and she's trying to live her life and cope in the best way she can. While also remembering these things and eventually like filing a report and kind of going through that process that we typically think like SVU type, what you would think happens with sexual assault. But then, I don't want to spoil it, but then like other characters are also experiencing other forms of violence that kind of don't get treated the same way. And it's also juxtaposing those things. So I thought it's a really good show.
Definitely. And I'm really, it's interesting because I feel like a topic being written and played out like that isn't something you would have seen maybe like 10 years ago. Like I feel like you just said, the only time we really experienced sexual assault on TV was like SVU, this like really aggressive, stranger danger like experience. But here we have, you know, Michaela Cole, and I know I love her as a writer, as a comedian.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see how she kind of wove it into these everyday real life moments too. Because even though she experienced sexual assault, she's still a person that has to go to work and has to like, and we get to see kind of like her experience as the survivor versus SVU kind of just showing like this like manhunt.
And I think that's really important. I was just thinking about that, just how like authentic, and I'm a survivor, you know, and so watching that show and watching like her describe her relationships, the conversations she's having with the people she's dating, all those things, it was very relatable, and it was very clear that a survivor wrote this show, that a survivor created this. It was very, very clear, and I think that that's something that is often not given to survivors. Like, when do survivors of assault, especially that belong to like other marginalized identities, when do they get a chance to have agency? You know what I mean? In telling their stories, really. It's always like a media narrative or gossip or something like that. And then the very thing they went through is like taking away of their autonomy and of their agency. So it is a really powerful thing to see a survivor, and especially a Black woman survivor of violence, be able to like create her own narrative around what happened. You know?
Definitely. And to kind of, you know, talk also on HBO Max, we've been watching Betty. And Betty's a show about these young, kind of like 19 to 25 age group, you know, cool girls living in New York City. They kind of form like a skate group. And it kind of goes through their everyday life experiences with like dating, awkward moments. We see it across, I was telling Bianca, I love how they show it across like all sexuality spectrums, and how like we see same-sex awkward first dates and opposite sex like awkward first interactions, and it's really great and authentic to see. And in one of the spoiler alert, so if you skip this part if you don't want to know what happened in the show, but what was her name?
Which
the character with the Donald's friend?
The main character, Janae.
Janae.
Yeah.
Janae has an experience where her and her best friend, who she lives with, who she also used to date, I think maybe early in college or early in high school, her first boyfriend, they are now roommates, really good friends. They have a YouTube show, and he's like, oh, I turned off the YouTube comments because we had a bunch of trolls. And she was like, oh, okay, like, that's weird, but okay. And one of her friends from the skate group shows her a screenshot of the comments, and basically Janae's best friend, Donald, is being outed. And it's really interesting seeing Janae kind of process that, and process, you know, not only having someone that she knows be called out, but someone so close to her that she also has, you know, close experiences with. And in the process of Donald being called out, at first she's like, that girl is lying. There's a lot of internalized kind of like slut shaming going on. She talks with the girl who is accusing Donald, and Janae realizes that the same thing that the girl went through, she also went through when she was dating Donald, but didn't realize or understand or process or reflect that was sexual assault. And it's just so, I think, beautiful how the writers showed this very raw, authentic process of,
Absolutely.
at first she was defensive, and at first she wanted to, fight the girl who she believed was lying on her best friend's name. But after calming down, after hearing her out, after talking to her face to face, it was also beautiful because I liked how the show, it wasn't just like, this girl's calling her out and that's it. Like, she's just this kind of like internet figment. Like, we got to see this kind of interaction between Janae and the girl explain her side, and Janae kind of have emotional responses to that.
Yeah.
And so it's also, that show is also like a little bit relatable in a sense that, like, I feel like through the pandemic, through the quarantine, through a lot of liberation struggles that we've seen kind of come back up, we've seen I feel like I personally in my timeline have seen a lot of names, call outs happening.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I wanted to have this conversation and discussion, because, what is the etiquette around that? You know what I mean? Like, for me, I'm always wondering, like, how do we process this? How do we hold people accountable? How do we make sure we are also not overwhelming ourselves with trying to process everyone's call outs, because it's happening it feels like the timeline daily, and we're seeing call outs of people we know, celebrities we liked, celebrities who we didn't even know of, but maybe it impacted someone we know from Chicago. There's been layers of a lot of call outs, and that's why I really liked, how the show kind of showed that spectrum of emotions.
Exactly. No, I thought, I also felt the same way, like, they did a great job at constructing that process, and like you said, yeah, we are seeing a lot of that in our timelines and just, like, in our community in general, and I feel like it can be triggering, but literally just what happened with Janae, that character in the show, where she realized through this person coming forward that that's also what happened to her. That's definitely something that happens to a lot of survivors. And so I can imagine that it's survivors that maybe already identify as a survivor that are feeling triggered, just feeling reminded about victim blaming, about their own situation, but also people who are probably coming to terms with what they experienced for the very first time, and that's a really difficult process. And even just from the work that I do, I know that that's, like, literally hormones in your brain are being released again, kind of in the same way as if you were being assaulted, right? So you're going into that same
emotional state.
Yes, and it's a state of, like, shock, and also fight, flight, freeze, all these different things that can last from days to weeks, right? So just a lot happening, and I know that I've had to take care of myself and just kind of, like, I don't know, I haven't muted anything because I like to know.
I was going to say, like, what things, how have you been, I feel like something a lot of people have been struggling with is, like, how do I both stay informed but also make sure I'm giving myself, like, breaks? So what things how have you been, like, finding spaces for yourself throughout all this? Especially as a survivor who might be feeling triggered every time you open Twitter, like, how do you process that?
I think that I have just been trying to limit my time on social media in general, especially on days where I'm feeling more anxious than normal. And then, other than I literally watched Michaela Cole's show. But other than that, I try to limit, like, what kinds of media I consume, like, what themes are present, you know what I mean? Depending on what's going on. So limiting that, but also then surrounding myself with people that I know are gonna, like, make me feel good and comfortable. And, like, I have agency. You know what I mean? Not that I don't in general. That I don't typically surround myself, but, just, like, my close peeps, other
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, quarantine really put a lot of things into perspective about, like, if you are I feel like we're both people who, for years, we've been building our, like, emotional support toolkit of, like, not just, like, okay, let me breathe and do yoga, but, like, also just, like, really trying to reverse any toxic ways of thinking, or you
Yeah.
know, reverse ideas of like blaming ourselves for anxiety and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and with that comes surrounding yourself with people who do the same. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I think that like the pandemic really kind of amplified that. And I feel like a lot of people had to really realize like, who is my like network, or where is my
Yeah.
network? What is my network? And you know, if
Who can I rely on
Mhm.
to like, you know?
and that's what I love about Betty, how they show like Janae is going through all this, but she's also like talking to her girls. Like she's like her friends went with her to the meetup with the survivor, and it kind of shows her process afterwards when she's talking with them and she's realizing, and they're validating her,
and her friends validating her, but also checking her, because I think it's Honey Bear,
Mhm.
right? Honey Bear.
I know it's honey in it.
Honey,
I think it is
Honey Bear.
Bear.
Okay, we'll say that their name is Honey Bear. Honey Bear was checking her though. She was like, "What are you doing?" Like, she's the one that told her about those comments,
Right.
and then she also checked back in with her about it. Like, so what happened?
Yeah.
And she's like, "I don't know, man. Like, I don't think that's
Right.
you know what I mean."
And her
I don't think
friends
that's
were
right, and you shouldn't react this way. You know what I mean?
Because, like we said, she was being a little like slut-shamey, and of course, from the show, I feel like you could tell it was coming from a place of like defense. Like she was just trying to like make sense of it, and it's kind of hard because it's like this person who she literally lives with, like their image is being shattered right in front of her, and she's, you know, maybe her first response was to try to hold on to this image that she had for whatever reason, and so that led her to kind of like, she looks like, you know, she was saying things like, oh, that girl looks like the kind of girl that would just make false claims, and her friends are like, well, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean by that? And,
exactly.
And it's really great to see that process too, because I feel like that's a really important part of our networks is, you know, the people who are going to check us, but with our interests at heart. You know what I mean?
Of course. And it made sense. Like, what she was saying didn't sound like something that their friend group typically says. Like, it made, like, when she was saying those things, you could tell her friends were like, oh, this is not even something that, we don't talk like that. Like, we don't, you know what I mean? So it was very clear, like, she must be just coming from a very emotional place and a very real place, and no one's perfect, you know? And like you said, we're always trying to grow and learn and be better, but, like, we're gonna fuck up, and we're gonna, like, react emotionally sometimes, but that's why, yes, we have to always try to check ourselves, but also, like, check our friends, make sure our friends feel comfortable checking us, you know, so that we just hold each other accountable, right? Like, and I don't mean, like, hold your friends, like, accountable, I just mean, like, I think Honey Bear compassionately held Janae accountable
for sure.
You know?
Definitely. Absolutely. And I think also there's a level of, like, they seem to have trusted her that she would, like, she would figure it out eventually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they checked her, but also trusted that she eventually was going to realize, like, oh, and, like, of course...
I'm tweaking.
Right, and the show realized that, the show kind of really did a good job in writing out that, like, the reason she was tweaking is because she was kind of repressing her own, you know, trauma and that experience, and it's, you know, it was just, it felt very, like, authentic and relatable, because I feel like none of us are free from, like, using our defense mechanisms, our antiquated defense mechanisms, because at one point that's what we needed to survive a toxic or harmful situation. And I really liked how the show, and both shows, put humanity to these experiences.
Yeah, and humanity to, like, getting it wrong too, to being imperfect, to, like, that this is messy, you know, and that's something that, like, other shows that we've seen sexual violence portrayed, like SVU, right? It's not really portrayed like that. It's very black and white, very, like, this is the victim, this is the bad guy, these are the saviors, boom, and that's it, and nobody,
and then justice,
and then the American criminal justice system, just, you know, prosecutes all of those rapists.
Exactly, and in
which
this
doesn't happen.
And also what I liked about
I'm not good with sarcasm.
You're like, no, I just want to know we're joking. Like, that's this criminal justice system sucks. But I also liked with Betty, how it kind of showed, like, you know, her first instinct wasn't like, we gotta call the cops. Like she was really trying to process, and I think it does a good job in showing that, like, it isn't black and white. This can be something that happens in an everyday situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, it isn't this, like, that only happens to this kind of person who da-da-da. You know what I mean? Like, it really, I really love how it showed, like, yeah, like, she was just going, her and her best friend had this really successful YouTube show, and she, like, loves this person, and she lives with this person, and, like, suddenly, like, she has to process and unpack this, but it isn't this, like, really fantastical thing. It's like, I don't know, it's just such a relatable way to portray her experience, you know what I mean? Because I feel like something that a lot of TV shows get wrong, like we see in SVU, is, like, that survivors immediately want to go to police, or survivors immediately want to press charges, or survivors immediately want to, like,
do anything,
go
honestly.
fight this person. Yeah. You know what I mean? I loved how, like, her first instinct was, it shows her, you know, this scene of her in the public library, like, deleting the YouTube channel with her and her best friend, and that felt more powerful than her, like, going to a detective, or her going to, trying to mobilize people to press charge. Like, that felt so much more relatable, you know what I mean, than this idea of going to, but
it was meaningful to her, right? Exactly. It was meaningful to her, and that, I feel like that was the important part, is that that act was meaningful to her, and I think, like, even when we're as advocates at work, right, like when we're working with survivors professionally, we know that the criminal justice system is not going to likely not charge their cases, or some people are not looking for that at all,
right?
And you are helping folks get, like, financial compensation, or, you know what I mean, like, look for therapy, housing. But for us, it's like, what is success? And success is usually any moment where that survivor is feeling, like, empowered. We're here to give options. We're not here to tell people what to do with their life, even if we feel like, you know, if we feel like it's not the choice we'd make, whatever.
Exactly. Because even if a survivor does want to go to police, that's also very valid. Like, that's, it's, I think, ultimately, it's important for all systems to center survivors, whether it's restorative justice or criminal justice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, allow survivors to figure out and take the time necessary to figure out what will help them feel empowered, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I mean, we know that the criminal justice system doesn't really center survivors, you know? It just doesn't. Even in Illinois, it's considered a crime against the state, and the state's attorney decides whether they press charges or not. And the person doesn't really have too much of a, like, say. That's why when people are like, I'm going to press charges, I mean, is the state's attorney going to press charges? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's why I love seeing portrayals of friendships and support networks like that, where they are supporting each other through just processing this and figuring out, like, what are we even going to do? Like, okay, so she felt empowered in that moment to delete the channel. That's one step of her feeling, like, I have control. I know what I'm doing, you know? And I think that's what you mentioned, like, it was such a powerful moment to you. And I guess that's what we need to focus on, honestly.
Yeah.
That's my opinion as a survivor, and as having worked with survivors, like, we protect each other.
Absolutely.
Our friends, you know, our community.
Protect and nourish each other.
Yeah.
And I really also like how you mentioned, because I feel like it kind of ties back to everything, is, like, how the show shows friendship, and, like, friendship support, and friendship accountability. And I think kind of like what we've been seeing now is a lot of these systems around us have been crumbling as a result of the pandemic, because they were systems that weren't really built on anything foundational to begin with. So when we saw the health system kind of, like, crumbling, or, you know, survivors couldn't really go to the hospital, they didn't feel safe going to the hospital, or, you know, they don't feel safe going to, maybe putting the person who caused them harm, maybe they don't feel comfortable putting them in a jail where it would risk their literal life with, you know, COVID. Like, COVID has really, really exacerbated all the holes that were in a lot of these institutions around us. And that's why I love portrayals of like intercommunal. And I feel like sometimes people don't think intercommunal like sustainability is as realistic as it is.
Yeah.
Which is why I love seeing shows where it's like these young women, like mostly like black women, queer black women, are here figuring it out and like, you know what I mean, just showing each other genuine compassion and love, and are finding spaces to heal and spaces for joy and spaces to overcome their anxieties. And so that's why I'm really happy that you brought that up, because I mean that's kind of why I wanted to have this talk as well, is like to bring light to like, and encourage people to think about like, what are the foundations around them? What are the foundations they'd like to see around them if they don't see that now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely love seeing those portrayals of just like community nourishment. And I feel like you said, like people don't think it's possible all the time, but it happens all the time, especially in poor communities, in communities of color, in queer chosen families, and like, because like these are people that already, for the most part, can't rely on the state. The state doesn't protect them. The state doesn't give people, you know, it doesn't give us what we need, right? And so communities have already kind of been forced to do it. I think being intentional about doing it is like the key. And that's what I feel like we haven't seen too much about. I've seen some communities and people do it, but being very intentional about doing it, I feel like...
How do you think folks can be more intentional, or where do you think, like, what do you mean by intentional?
Yeah, I guess it's just like, for example, like immigrant communities, like unintentional, right? So unintentional, I think that happened with like my family. I come from an immigrant family, immigrant community, and people often had to rely on each other for childcare, to help, like bandas, you know what I mean? Like people are like passing around money. Multiple people have stayed in my house. You know, like people. Even
if we take it a step further, like traditional medicine, like I feel like a lot, because I'm also from an immigrant neighborhood and family. You know, relying maybe we don't have access to we didn't have access to insurance, or insurance. You know, copays are too expensive, so you go to the local componedor, or you go to the botanica and you try to find herbs to. And definitely, I totally feel you on that.
Absolutely. And so, like, I feel like it kind of already happens organically sometimes out of need, right? Like, people need things, but then it's even more successful and I think sustainable when folks are doing it intentionally, and maybe even, like, if people have more resources or privilege, like, we're intentionally building community, right, with our own community members. Like, if I'm, you know, Latinx, I'm from the Southwest side, and I'm more intentional about with me having a college degree and whatever, well, all right, that I acquired now. Being intentional about using that to like contribute to my community, you know what I mean? And then contributing my skills, my tarot skills, like everyone being able to contribute more intentionally with the people that you're in community with. Or like even amongst like our friend group, you know, like if we're like, hey, do you need anything? Like, let's all pitch in and organize to send someone who's sick
a care package,
meals for the next couple. You know what I mean? Like being very intentional. I think a good resource that I think we should put this in the resource guide is about pod mapping, and it's literally a tool that was created by the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective.
There you go.
There we
Look
go.
at that. You just pulled out of the memory kingdom.
I think Mia Mingus, yes.
Okay.
Created that. I'll double check. But pod mapping, so you're literally sitting down and like creating your pod, and you're looking at like, who are my relationships? Who do I feel comfortable trusting? You know, with if I'm in a crisis or something. Have I looked at like what I can provide to them, or like if we are like, how those relationships are doing? You know, you're like actually taking a second to reflect on your relationships, the health of your relationships, and your community, and like who would you go to in those instances? Also, or to hold me accountable, who would I go to? So it's a really great tool, and I know a lot of people are using it already. I think it would be great if people used it more.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think we could look at it even in terms of, like, you know, today's focus is, you know, around sexual assault and survivors, and it's like, yeah, like you said, trying to map out, like, who would I feel comfortable disclosing to, or who, like, how would I respond to someone disclosing me? What can I do for someone who is disclosing to me? Like, am I the person to, you know, like, call them every day and check on them? Am I the person to go with them if they want to confront this person? You know what I mean? Like, trying to figure out not only who you can go to, but how you can be of support. Because I think another thing sometimes people assume is that maybe they don't have the skills for whatever reason to be a part of a movement. They feel like, oh, I can't financially support this person, or I don't feel comfortable going with them and sitting in a mediation. But, like, you know, it's all about figuring out, like, if you love cooking and you want to offer, like, to send meals to this person while they're like processing, like, that's powerful. If you're really great at giving hugs and you want to, like, you know, it is COVID, so if you know this person, you trust this person, if you feel comfortable, like, just give them, like, physical support, like, just kind of holding their hand as they talk to you, whatever the case is, I truly believe there is space for everyone in this. You know?
Absolutely, and especially for caretaking and nurturing roles, there is so much room for that. We need more people, we need more masculine people to take on those roles. You know what I mean? It's super needed. Doesn't get a lot of credit, like, right, like teachers and people who care for folks don't get, it's not a sexy job.
Or a job that under these standards of capitalism is validated. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the jobs that often require nurturing or caretaking are put at the bottom of the economic pool, which is frustrating, but I feel like another example of why I truly believe in, like, intercommunal sustainability. You know what I mean? Because, like, I feel like another thing quarantine has shown us, or a lot of people, is, like, capitalism really does fucking suck and is not a sustainable, like, way to live. And if I feel like we can genuinely tie back everything to capitalism, like we can tie back a lot of the evils in this world to capitalism. And, you know, like you said, maybe that's why people don't feel validated in their roles as caretakers, because capitalism has told us, like, that's not going to make you a lot of money. Why do you want to be a teacher? That's not going to make you a lot of money. But it's like, teachers are necessary, you know? And even your role as a social worker, like, you know, or as a case manager in this, you have to do so much different kind of labor, too. Like, you do so many different jobs in one. You know what I mean? Like, you are often people's, like, counselor, legal kind of, like, advisor, medical advisor. Like, you have to know the current laws on top of the medical law. Like, there's just so many things you have to know. But, like, what is the ongoing joke, you know, social workers, that there's no money in that? But it's so frustrating. And
there's no money in that. But, and also, like, you know, we shouldn't have to do that, right? Like, I work for a nonprofit, like, and I mean, I'll say that, like, we would like to see a day where we're not.
That should be the goal of all nonprofits. Exactly. I mean?
So, like, you know, in a perfect world, like, a lot of people in people's lives would already have these skills. You know, not saying that we wouldn't still need people to maybe take, obviously, counselors, obviously, like, people to still do roles like that. But we'd probably need a lot less of them if we had people that had these skills from the beginning in communities, and that were able to care for each other. But for that, right, like you said, capitalism, we need to invest in those communities.
Absolutely. And I think another thing to think about in regards to sexual assault as well is, I saw this really, I cannot remember who said it, but someone said, like, oh, a lot of people think social workers are the answer, but there's a lot of people who are social workers that very much move like cops, move in a very, like, criminal justice, industrial complex kind of way. And I think this is where I say, like, we need to break down kind of these ideas or these beliefs that we have that maybe it did work at one point. We are all continuously, as No Name said, like, I love No Name for being so, like, vocal about, like, yeah, we're not perfect. We're gonna not, not everyone is gonna see it immediately or in their, like, teens, or some people were radical in high school. Some people don't get radical until they're, like, their 60s, whatever the case is. Like, I think that, a lot of folks, and this is something, I feel like we're all also always doing, is breaking down these, like, capitalist ideas and things like that. And, when she said, like, a lot of people think social workers are the solution, but, like, a lot of social workers, like that's very real. And I think that's where I also, to tie it back to, like, there are people who have social worker skills, but maybe because they could never afford to go to college, or maybe they had to focus on their family, or whatever the case is. Like, we talk about with your dad, who's someone who emigrated here and, like, had to focus on different things and didn't get the chance to, he's very passionate about counseling and helping folks through their transformations emotionally, but he is someone who came to America and had to kind of focus on working and wasn't provided the benefits of being able to afford to go to college and focus on that. But he has that skill, and I think that, in my perfect world, like, he would be someone who's doing that work regardless, because he has the calling, he has the ability, the calling, and even if it's just for his block, that's powerful. Exactly. You know what I mean?
That's huge, and I mean, like, I think that's a huge way that, like, when, the personal is political, like, you definitely, we talk about these big systems and these big structures and, like, all this stuff, and it's, like, seems so overwhelming sometimes, especially during these times, but I feel like something that helps me is to remember that, like, the biggest change you're going to make is with the people around you, like, your circle. So, like, you got to heal stuff within you, you got to work on stuff within you, and that also means, like, understanding where your skills lie, and understanding, like, who you are, so that you can help in whatever way that is authentic and natural to you. And, like, you interacting with your friend groups, with your family, how you handle your romantic and sexual relationships,
for sure.
What kind of respect you give people in those relationships, and how you support people that are being hurt in your life, and how you call out people that have been hurting others that are in your life.
Absolutely.
Not just, like, throw up your hands. I mean, I understand that, like, for triggering reasons, like, sometimes people might want to leave because, like, oh, somebody hurt someone else, fuck them. Okay. Sometimes that is the move, right? But, like, also, like, we're, as a community, responsible for each other, right? And so if someone's hurt by someone else, like, they're hurting. So, like, they need someone to hold them accountable. They need someone to, like,
absolutely
handle the person and make sure that they don't harm them again, they don't harm others. Like, this is where we all come in, right? And you'd hope that in the future that person, that you would do the same for you, that would hold space for each other like that, and also hold each other accountable.
Absolutely, because I think if we are immediately ostracizing people, or immediately just quick to, like, in every single situation, if we're just quick to, like, I'm cutting off ties with them. Here's my formal tweet saying, I no longer associate with blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you do that every single time someone in your circle or someone you've worked with is being called out for whatever, I feel like if everyone's just like, okay, well, we're just going to discard of this person now because they caused harm, well, we're essentially replicating the criminal justice system in our own, on a community level. And that's personally how I feel. I feel like if we're just quick to dispose of people, like, like you said, people, that like, all parties are hurting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that, like you said, there are instances where it's like, maybe you're feeling triggered, or maybe you don't know this person well, so you're not quite sure where it's not your place.
Yeah,
of course, like, I don't think we should be doing. I'm not trying to do counseling with every single person. You know what I mean? But, like, and I also want to say when, because I also think that, like, it's not a matter of if, because I feel like it's when, in that, like, we're all capable of causing harm. We're like, again, we're not perfect, and we're all capable of making mistakes. Maybe we overstepped the boundary. Maybe we didn't realize this thing triggered or hurt someone's feelings or whatever the case is. And I think everyone is capable of that, but it's how you like respond, check, and learn. And I think that like it's not a matter of if someone in your circle, it's when, because I feel like at some point we're all going to be faced with an instance, whether it's at work, in your family, in your friends, an instance where you see a harm has been done or is being done, and now you need to like, oh, what do I do? And I think it's important to be prepared for that moment. Like, what do you feel comfortable doing? Do you want to, like, do you feel comfortable going through an accountability process, or do you know contacts? Do you know resources? Do you know websites? Do you know pamphlets, books? To like, you know what I mean? Like, how are you? Like, do you want to focus on whoever the harm has been done to, and like talk to them? Whatever the case is, I think it's important that we all recognize and are real with the fact that, like, I don't know, like we can't just. And I feel like that's
it's not gonna happen.
Exactly.
Like, we're gonna have to deal with it at some point. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, we should be studying this. Like, we should, in a perfect world, right? Like, we'd learn this in school, and like we
emotional like intelligence would be like validated. But yeah, what are some like books or resources you'd recommend to someone who's like, how do I even go about holding someone accountable? Or how do I go about mediating harm?
Yeah, I think there's a book, The Revolution Starts at Home, is a really good, like, it's like go right into that, like what happens specifically in like activist communities, and like when someone's been harmed and how people have handled it. People handle it all different kinds of ways. Again, like, not every situation of harm is going to be responded to in the same way for different reasons. The survivors are all different and want different things, you know, and need different things, go through different phases. It's so, again, like, nothing is black and white, which is my other qualm with the criminal justice system, is like how like the same it treats situations. I mean, not the same as in like they treat survivors very differently depending on who the survivor is, but like
it's either like jail or no jail.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay. But yeah, the revolution starts at home, but also Insight Women of Color. If you go on their website, they have a ton of resources to books and websites. I'm pretty sure also the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, they have a lot of resources on their website too. That's where the pod mapping is from. So those are great places.
And we're also gonna like compile a list too. Like, I know this is like a lot, so like I don't know, like, okay,
what is this? No,
we're gonna compile
so much
resources.
But I think the most important thing at least from me, like reading stuff and going to trainings and whatever, is that every situation really is different, and to make sure you're just asking questions. That's my understanding. You know, you're asking questions of, those questions, should I be doing this? Is this my place? Am I the right person to do this right now? To like, talk with this person right now, to talk with the survivor. Am I the right person to do that?
Right.
Or can I reach out to the person who might be? Right?
Exactly.
Or like, am I the right person to reach out to the person who did the harming? Or is that person kind of like a late acquaintance? Well, one of my close friends is cool with them, so maybe I can be like...
That's where the pod mapping comes
in. Like...
And also, like, I think it's also important to know that, too, because it's like, no one can do this alone. Like, I can't single-handedly, like, reverse harm or help, like, mediate harm. Like, it is going to take different groups, different people. It's going to take, you know, if the person, again, like you said, it's not so black and white. If the person who caused the harm is from a different circle as the survivor, then that support group is going to look very different than if they were in the same, you know, friend bubble or the same circle. And it's just, you know, it's just always important to, like you said, like, be aware of that and also understand, like, maybe, you know, you're someone who's better at receiving the initial kind of raw emotion, versus like maybe you're someone who's better at the long term kind of like checking it, whatever the
Yeah.
case is.
And checking your feelings too. I think like whenever I've been in situations with like friends like this, or like with people I know, checking your own reactions, because again, like we saw in Betty, right? But like checking your own reactions and making sure that you are not going into, if you're gonna help someone, if you're gonna be that person's person, like being mindful, like, okay, they're in crisis, like does that doesn't mean I have to be in crisis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there are situations that are so urgent. Obviously, if someone's being harmed right there, if they're at risk of harming themselves, if that kind of thing is like urgent, you know what I mean? Someone like needs housing right now or something. Like those things are urgent. But maybe, with other things, we can find time to slow things down a bit and kind of like wait, like make sure someone's like in a good headspace, and calm to some degree, you know what I mean? Before we decide, all right, this is how we're gonna go about this situation. Like,
I think when we see things like this come up, something that I personally feel, but also like I see happen a lot, is I think things like this come up, and then folks are just like, we need to do something right now, and it's like, yes, of course, there needs to be some type of like mediation, accountability, mediation with the person, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But it's also like impossible to do something like that overnight, and I think that's why we see a lot of people just kind of say like, I am cutting ties, or like I'm, you know what I mean? And it's like, no, you don't have to have a response right away. And also, I'm gonna say this because I personally feel this. I don't think also responses need to be public every single time. Like, I don't think you need to formally tweet every single time. Obviously, if you were heavily associated with someone in a lot of public settings, or y'all work together a lot, whatever the case is. But like, just because you met someone once at a party and y'all follow each other on Twitter, like, doesn't mean you need to like, I denounce this person. You know what I mean? Like, I think it is okay. You can quietly unfollow. You can quietly message them. Whatever the case is, like, there are ways to do this too. And I don't know. That's just my personal point of view. I think it's, like I said, it's different for every instance. But I think that like you said, it is important to check that, like, where is this coming from? Because I know something that I used to struggle a lot with was that, like, I just wanted to fix and save the world. And it's just like, when someone came to me, I was very like, oh my God, I want to, like, you came to me, which means you must want me to help you mediate this. And sometimes people just wanted someone to listen. Yeah. And I think that's where it's important, and where we talk about centering survivors' wants and needs. Like, if they never explicitly say or said to me, like, I want to do something about this, then there's no reason for me to be going out trying to pull resources and gather. Like, if they're just like, I kind of just want to talk about it, and like, I want someone to hear me, or I just want someone to validate, whatever the case is, like, that's all you can provide. And even if you're in your gut or in your heart, you're like, I know just the perfect person to help you. If that's not what they're asking for, we can't project what we think someone needs onto them. And that's something I struggled with a lot. And I mean, to this day, I really make it a habit to, like, check in with myself before I, like, offer any advice.
Can I do that?
Right? Can I do that? Am I in the space to? Am
I the right person?
Am I the
to be
right
doing
person
this?
to be doing that?
Like,
did they say that? Asking yourself these things. I don't know. I think it helps you in being a better supportive pod to someone.
Absolutely. And this is not sage, by the way, because this is lavender leaves.
In case anyone was wondering.
Yeah.
So where do we get it from?
No. I don't know.
Bonnie Sante in Hyde Park. Shout out to Bonnie. I want to say Buena Noche, and I was like, that's absolutely not it. Bella Noche, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
That's what I was like.
Ashley, Buena Noche.
But, yeah, no, I think it is important to have that self-awareness, and this is why I think, to kind of tie it all together, this is kind of why we've been saying throughout this whole thing, like, just check in with yourself and check in with others. And it genuinely starts with a check-in and reflection. I mean, maybe reading isn't your thing, but, like, we are all experts in ourselves, and we all have the ability to, like, ask ourselves certain questions, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Checking in with yourself. Because how are you going to help someone if you're also not, like, there? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, present.
You can also cause a lot of harm. Mm-hmm. Unintentionally.
Unintentionally,
with great intentions, right? Like, but cause harm. Mm-hmm. Because that's someone in a very vulnerable situation. That when someone's been abused, whether it's sexual violence or domestic violence, like, that's a very delicate situation, and, like, not to scare people, but, you know, like, if you anything you say can hurt or harm someone's, like, healing process.
If you're not being intentional with your words, with your support, you can unintentionally harm or hurt or just not help the situation. You
and
know
survivors are being harmed continuously. I don't mean that, like, literally they already survived, like, an assault, right? Or like a violent attack. And then we live in a world that abides by rape culture, and so survivors continuously are dodging like negative things about themselves constantly in TV portrayals of assault, of, like, from dress codes to, right, like, consistently, you know, survivors are being told that things were their fault, mm-hmm. they're being gaslit. That's why so many survivors don't process that what happened to them was abuse mm-hmm. until so much later. Like, you know what I mean? And so survivors are already going through a lot. So the best thing that we can do is also provide those spaces for mm-hmm. folks to exist, be believed, you know what I mean, and have agency. Because mm-hmm. sometimes when we try to help, we're also we could unintentionally remove people's agency.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because someone's not in a place, and they're used to someone taking their agency. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. We gotta be careful. We just gotta be mindful.
Mindful and intentional.
With everything.
Mindful and intentional. It's really, like, it can sound scary, but, like, I think if we're just mindful and intentional,
intentional, and also, like, ready to admit that we're gonna fuck up. That it's already, and especially, like, when we're talking about, like, doing things differently, like, than the criminal justice system. I mean, the criminal justice system fucks up in a huge way to survivors. It fails survivors and causes harm. But, you know, we're trying to figure out as communities, how do we handle this after colonization, after all these things? How do we handle these huge issues? And that's a big deal. And there's already so many resources and so many people that have been doing this work. Mm-hmm. But, like, be kind to yourself as you're also unpacking things and unlearning things. Absolutely. And, like, learning how maybe what's a healthier way to, like, hold space with each other.
Absolutely.
And be in community with each other. We gotta be gentle with ourselves.
Absolutely. Gentle with ourselves. There's no need to put pressure on yourself. Like, you know, we're not all, like, sometimes, or but most of the time, do the work, but also don't expect yourself to be this, like, therapist for your friends, because only a therapist can be a therapist, and, like...
And there are some bad ones, too.
Yeah. But definitely, everything she just said, everything.
Yeah.
So, I feel like we've kind of come to the end, and I'd really like to end with some, like, tips, or, like, just sharing, like, how we've been finding, like, joy and space for ourselves, like, throughout all this, and seeing, you know, like, you mentioned, like, how the Michaela Cole show was, like, a little, like, I don't think you were expecting it to be so heavily focused on that, and it was just, like, whoa, like, now what?
Yeah,
like, how do I, or, like, when you're...
triggering, but really insightful.
Absolutely. And it's like, how do we, you know, find space and joy for ourselves? Because, you know, yes, we're in a pandemic, and yes, we're in a liberation, ongoing liberation movement, like, but people still fall in love and are happy. And,
yes.
You know what I mean? So, like, I'll have...
Let's talk about that.
Tune in next time to hear about my love life. But yeah, how have you been finding space and moments? How have you been creating moments for yourself?
Well, how have you had? Let's talk about you. How have you been creating those spaces for yourself, Miss Ashley?
I think for me,
how is being in a relationship? Actually, let's talk about it. How, like,
in a quarantine,
for real, like,
and
how
that
does
was a
that change,
sign.
like, relationship, like, even, like,
so
noticing
happy you brought it
relationship red flags, like,
Oh yeah,
because typically, like, you and I get to unpack a lot about our relationships, and that's how we also process and keep each other safe and make sure no one's.
We are like
taking
literal
advantage of
mirrors
us.
to each
Yeah.
other. Like we talk to each other, and it's like, okay, you said this, and I know you mentioned that you had this experience with this person. Do you think it's like time? You know what I mean?
And because we like platonically trust each other so much, we know that like, yeah, like I know like if I'm in a shitty situation, like I'm gonna catch it, and if I don't catch it, Ashley's gonna catch it. Like somebody's gonna be like, wait,
someone
a minute.
in my circle, in my pod.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
how has that been considering everything that is happening?
I would say it's interesting that we like started dating like literally the week before like we were on lockdown, and it really did kind of force me to kind of like be aware and present and intentional in my dating. And not that I'm not someone who's intentional, but like I had to quickly decide like what are my intentions with this person? What do I want with this person? What do I want from relationships? Like, does this person, like, I had to quickly analyze and look at those things. And I mean, obviously he is my boyfriend now. So like, like we are compatible, and it's great falling in love during like a time like this, because
love in the time of
Corona, because it's like, you know, someone said it so beautifully that like these things aren't going to stop just because we are in a pandemic, just because like we are in the streets marching more now, just because like we are in an economic like depression. People aren't going to stop starting families. They're not going to stop falling in love. They're not going to stop making friends or experiencing joy. And it's been.
And if you think that it should stop, you're a fucking Grinch.
Because
like,
we are all about decolonizing pleasure here. And we're all about pleasure activism. I think that's one of the books here. We are about pleasure. And I think centering pleasure is so important. And I think that's why I wanted to kind of like somewhat end on the topic of pleasure, because, you know, even when we talk about survivors, I think it's important to encourage finding pleasure. Finding pleasure. I mean, for a while, it wasn't until one of my friends, when I was in conversation, that I was like, talking about a sexual experience I had with an ex, where they were like, that kind of sounds like sexual assault. And like to this day, I don't quite identify with that, but like that was definitely a relationship I didn't feel very safe or validated or heard in. And so it's to like, and it's been kind of like years of like processing and unpacking like my agency in relationships, because I feel like relationships, I'm so, you know, everyone always thought I was this like boss bitch until it came to my relationships. I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like I was a boss bitch, and I felt like I was so nervous and anxious and like just didn't have a voice, and that's because of some of my early experiences. And I think that, you know, finding pleasure during this time, it's both been, it's been hard but easy. And it's been hard because I'm someone who like, I love being outside. I'm a Sagittarius. I love traveling. I love experiences. I love immersing myself in stuff. I'm also a DJ. Like, I love being out. I love the energy of crowds and being out, and I sorely miss that. And usually when I have a bad day, I can just like go, I don't know, like shopping, go see one of my friends' gigs, go pull up on some of my friends in my neighborhood, like go see my family. Like there's just so many things that were taken away from me, but it's also great because I am also someone who can be a bit of a workaholic, and I can be someone who's just like so hyper fixated on like work and outcome and goals and achieving my goals and and like it's been nice and new having to be very intentional about my pleasure and my joy, and like I like being like, oh, I recognize that I've been very in my head, so like I have to go to the park and sit there for 2 hours, or like ride my bike to this thing, like. And being in a relationship during all this, it's definitely different, but it's also like it's with someone who's so open, and it's so easy to be in a relationship with them that it doesn't feel like, oh, he's giving me mixed signals, and like I don't know, like they're like I just feel like right now there is no room for mixed signals. details. Like, I just feel like you can't just like, hey, let's make plans and then I flake. Like, no, you have to be very intentional about meetups and hanging out and going out and seeing people. And I think that like
are we abolishing the police or not? Are you down?
Exactly, and that's another thing. There's also been so many things that have come up during the pandemic as far as like, you know, me and my boyfriend are technically unemployed because we're musicians, so like having to go through that together, quarantine together,
definitely.
Going to protests and leading, like, you know, supporting each other and during the movement and like making sure we see eye to eye on things, because if he was like pro-police or if he was like, I would, that'd be like, okay, like exit stage left, like this clearly, or you know what I mean, like I just feel like this quarantine has brought up so many necessary conversations that we have to have when it comes to our love life. Because I was talking to my other best friend PJ about it, and he was like, oh, you know, our generation and titles, and I'm just like, damn, our generation does have a hard or a different time communicating about relationships. And I think you said it best too when you talked about how like our generation and the generation Gen Z, how like we kind of opened the door for like abolishing a lot of these like sexist or patriarchal like traditional ways of dating, and we kind of opened that door for them, and so they're kind of able to process it quicker, but we're still kind of in this limbo of like, oh shit, now what though? Like, we abolished everything, but like, what does that look like now? And I feel
then
like,
what do we build?
What exactly? And I feel like,
how do we build?
And I feel like our generation has very much been in this gray area as far as like building, and it honestly, it's very invigorating and energizing to see Gen Z like so on top. Like I love Gen Z. Like
even just seeing that little girl process her feelings about the pandemic.
Oh my god! That there's this video on Twitter of this little girl, and she's just like, the only thing that's open is nothing. But she's like processing it and she's vocalizing like, it's no fun waiting in line at McDonald's in the drive-thru. I want to play in the playpen, and like, why do germs show up if no one likes germs? And like, I know I need to stay inside, but like, I just want to be outside. Like, it's so beautiful seeing this 4-year-old
process that out loud with her parents. Clearly,
crying.
She feels safe with her parents, like processing that. Like, no one's gonna like tell her, oh, that like stop, you know. And also, she's not having a tantrum because she's not like, she's vocalizing how she feels.
Right, she's just emotional.
She's just very emotional. She's 4 years old, obviously.
She's her. I mean, the same. Like, that's how I'm feeling too. Like, queen. Like,
but it gives me hope too of like, wow, who is that little girl gonna be? I mean, I don't know. I think she's older. Like,
when you just talked about like how she felt like safe in her like with her parents, and I think that's something that like our generation, like boomers, were always like, oh, you guys complain so much, because we really focused and prioritized like safety and emotions and mental health in the workplace, in relationships, in, you know, things like that. Like we truly were not having it for like, you know, we're not gonna just go to work and pretend like everything's okay when actually like something's awful is happening at home. Like, it's really great to see folks my age in professional workplaces. Like, I know with the Babes Only team, like, we always start with a check-in. It's never this like stuffy board meeting where, you know what I mean? Like, it's chill. We're like, hey, what's everyone up to? Like, how's everyone feeling? And if someone's going through something, we're like, oh shit, like, fuck it, we'll start the meeting a little bit later. Like, we'll go a little over if someone feels like they need to talk about something, you know what I mean? So it's been really, and I think to tie it kind of back to like, you know, my personal love life and just like our love lives in general, I think that's the thing about the pandemic too, is that you not only have to feel emotionally safe with this person, but also you have to trust that like, have they been in quarantine? Do they have my best interests at heart? And like, that's why I say there's no room for like, you want to come over at 3 a.m. You know what I mean? Like,
hell no.
That's just like,
who are you?
And then like, if that's what you feel comfortable and empowered by, like, that's really great. But I think that I think that this
talk through the window.
Are you gonna get like, are you gonna get tested and then you're gonna quarantine after the test? You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much more thought that has to go into interacting, and I am really a little bit excited to see like what that's gonna look like when this is over. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that before quarantine even started, I was in a place where I was like, you know, we started quarantine a little bit on the same page as far as, like, we're looking for something serious. Like, you know what I mean? We're done with the games. We were like, we're dating intentionally. And then, like, I ended up with the boyfriend. And you're like, okay, bitch. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine being single in the quarantine. And she was
I was like,
I am single.
hello, I am.
And so, from your point of view as someone who is single, actively looking, and not only looking, but intentionally looking for a relationship, you know, fulfilling partnership, what has that been like for you, you know? I'm not the only one to be on the spot.
It has been, it's not been that great, honestly. I mean, it's not been that great as far as, like, but it hasn't been that great as far as, like, people are, like, definitely playing games, or, like, you see people that have not been social distancing at all from, like, the beginning. You know what I mean? It's so creepy. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's kind of just, like, it just shines a light on, like, who people are. Because then you get to see, I'm judging your character. Like, if you're not willing to social distance, you don't care about other people, you don't care about community, we don't have the same values.
Absolutely.
You know, this is not going to work.
Values,
like, yeah. And at least I get to know that, like, right away. Mm-hmm. And not, like, after I've gone on a couple dates, and I'm like, oh, you that's how you feel about this? And I'm, like, asking questions and figuring it out. I'm like, no, from the beginning, I'm like, okay, this is already a...
You can kind of peek. Yeah.
Remove these people from from possibly dating me.
Do you think that's kind of, like, helped, though, filter, or, like, you know what I mean?
Filter I think so. I think it's helped filter people who are selfish.
Absolutely. Or even, like, and that's what I mean by, like, this quarantine has really brought so many things to the forefront where you really get to see people's values. Like, like I was saying, like, if my boyfriend was like, you know, like, maybe we just need to reform, or, you know what I mean? I would have been like, oh, we have different, like, views on these fundamental things that are so important to me. Or, like, if, you know, while we were, you know, dating before he was my boyfriend, he kind of was like, I don't need a face mask, or, like, that to me would indicate, like, oh, so you, like, don't love yourself. Like, you don't care.
You don't care about other people.
Others, not just yourself, but you don't care about if you're sick and you might harm someone else who is helpless. Or, like, the thing, too, with, like, how, you know, like, how are people treating or talking about essential workers, you know? Like, and he, you know, obviously, like I said, he wouldn't be my boyfriend if he, like, wasn't, like, prioritizing these things, but it's, like, are people ensuring that they're not endangering waiters by going out right now and acting like nothing's wrong? Or are they making sure to leave a tip now more than ever is tipping? Because I know that's always, like, a debate about, like, some people are like, should you leave a tip on a date? Blah, blah, blah. First of all, yes, you should always be tipping at least 20%. Yeah, like, I know that.
Wait,
so no, it is, Bianca.
I'm sorry.
Why would you not leave? Remember we saw it on Dating Around when he was like, you know what that means because she fucked up our order? No tip. Remember we saw that? And she was like, whoa, you're tweaking. That's another good show, Dating Around. If you're trying to, like, really, like, psychoanalyze some people's love life, is Dating Around, because you get to see these very genuine interactions that, like, okay, it's set before pre-quarantine, so of course at a restaurant and stuff, but it's like, if you're on a date with someone and they want to, like, order out and they don't want to tip, or, you know what I mean, things like that are really important to me to pay attention to. And I think that, like, this quarantine has really just lifted the veil on a lot of things. On, like, a universal, like, global scale, but also on people's politics and people's values and how people, you know, where people's humanity and compassion lies. And I think, like, for me, it just felt so innate and natural to just, like, dig myself into my community and, like, send funds where we're necessary, or help out, or give rides, or drop things off to folks, or do wellness checks, things like that. Like, that felt innate to me. But, like, you know, like you said, if you meet someone who's, like, they haven't been quarantined from the jump, that lets you know, like, okay, we have different values.
Yeah, or they're just not doing anything to help in any way for multiple things. You know, if their first thought isn't like, wait, what can I do? How can I help? How can I, change things in my life, my personal life? If they don't ask themselves those questions, if they don't have the same values as me. They just don't. Like, I value community, relationships.
Absolutely.
I value, like, really meaningful, intimate connections. And, yeah, no, the pandemic definitely kind of, like, accelerates that.
Absolutely.
Everything, I think it does kind of, like, accelerate, like, that process of filtering out.
And I think that, like, also, like I said, it does accelerate that. And it's not only forcing you, but it's forcing, like, others. And I feel like others to kind of have that process as well.
Yeah.
And if, like, someone's not, like, you can't just, like, half-ass relationships right now. Maybe
No,
you can, and
right?
I'm, like, not aware. But, like, maybe, like, somehow, like, people have found a way. But I just feel like...
But if we're even gonna, like, if I'm even gonna be involved, like, first of all, like, we're gonna have to be, like, wearing masks. Like,
right.
I'm just thinking about that. Like, you'd have to go get tested. I mean, if we're gonna have sex, like, now you have to get double tested.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So
type shit. And
like,
it should be...
You're gonna do a lot in order for us to even, like, see each other consistently. So it's like, are you willing to do that work? Like,
and it's also...
You get to see that way quicker.
Not just physical work, but it's also, like, are you going to open yourself up to me emotionally where you, like, trust me? Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these emotional checkpoints that usually some people skirt around if they're kind of, like, maybe they're unaware they're not ready or are just kind of, like, out here trying to, like, play the field, whatever the case is. Like, you can't really skirt around not giving some level of emotion to people right now. Like, you know what I mean? There's going to have to be a level of, like, trust. Like, I'm going to have to immediately trust that you have been in quarantine, that you've been tested, that you... Things like that. And I think that that's an element that we didn't really see before. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm very excited and curious to see, like, what that's... And I'm saying I'm excited just to be nosy and see how everyone else's, like, love life, like, plays out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not excited, like, I'm not about to be out here, like, all right, like, what's the field like? But it is very... I have to clear that in the air really quick. Like, this is an excitement for me. It's more... And I think I'm just excited for you, genuinely, because, like, we, like you said, we process and unpack so much together, and I'm just so excited to see, like, what these people bring to the table now. You feel me? Like, how are you coming from, like, to my best, how are you stepping to my best friend now? You feel me? Like, have you been tested? Like, have you been, like, how are you going to get creative with taking her on dates? You know what I mean? Shit like that, you know? How are you going, and that's what I mean by you can't just unintentionally want to come over at 11 and watch Netflix. Like, okay, you can, but, like, you're going to have to go through periods of, like, social distance picnics, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, how are we going to build that rapport?
Come to my window and, like, send me things in a basket, and then we'll, like, see, you know?
Exactly.
There. Like, after that, maybe bring, like, a serenade, I don't know.
Right. We need a full live band, a full mariachi outside. I need you singing.
But that's interesting, too, because, like, that's something, obviously, it was different because you and Ryan, at least you were already kind of, like, seeing each other before.
We were familiar with each other.
Yeah.
We come from a very same friend group, so there was this immediate level of trust. Yeah.
But in a similar way, though, I got to see still, like, oh, like, how are y'all dating? Like, how are y'all, like...
We were having, like, FaceTime dinners, and, like...
Yeah,
because
so
it just
cute.
kind of got boring. Like, I go to your house, you come to my house. Like, dating is also fun. Like, I love dating in the element of, like... And I think this is where we relate. We love the aspect of, like, going out dancing, going to picnics, watching a new movie, cooking together, going shopping together. Like, just, like, these different experiences are what truly bond and connect people. So it's, like, I'm very curious and excited to see, like, okay, how are you going to bond with me? And, like, with me and Ryan, it was very, like, yeah, I set up FaceTime dates. What else did we do? Like, we just make things that were...
Park,
we'd walk around. Like, we just find ways to get
have
excited. New experience, because that's what bonds people. That's what bonds us, is different experiences, seeing people in different environments, seeing how someone is in their home, how they are at a garden, how they are at a function, how they are around their friends,
how they are when they're doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like y'all have, DJ together.
Yeah.
You've cooked together. You've done tasks together that you had to rely on each other for.
And so it's been great, like, building that with, and like I said, I think it came also, we were both very ready. Like, we were both very open to, like, we knew what we wanted. Like, me and him dated a little bit before, over, like, last summer, and I was not in a place to be a girlfriend. And that's why things didn't work out for us the first time. And then we reconnected, and, we were both finally, like, on the same page.
Yeah.
And I always tell him, like, I'm so happy. I think it came at a perfect moment, because I think I needed this, like, honeymoon phase to propel me through quarantine. Because, like, it was almost perfect timing. And I think, but like I said, I think it's open to be aware of, like, yeah, shit is easier when people are in a place to be open to receiving and reciprocating.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, like, a lot of people are kind of having to analyze right now, is, like, how open are they? How much are they willing to receive and reciprocate? And that's why it worked with us, and that's why I'm excited to see, like, okay, when you really do enter the dating pool, again, for real, like, how are these people gonna come? Are they gonna, like, know what they want? Because
hopefully,
right? I sure fucking hope so. Because after you have had 5 months to fucking think about it. We've been in timeout for 5 months.
Reflection.
You feel me? Like, you've had enough time. And again, it's like, if you haven't been doing that work, that's also like, well, then, gee, what have you been doing? Like, what? we should all be taking this time to, like, reflect and think to ourselves and talk to our friends, build ourselves emotionally, physically, spiritually. And, like, we're very spiritual people. So it's if someone just hasn't been working on those tools or things like that, then it's like, that's also like, well, we've literally been putting in that work for 4 months. So what you doing? What you doing, pal?
Right, yeah. And I mean, in the same vein, like, when we're talking about, like, people who maybe were in, like, toxic relationships, right? Maybe during that time, like, I think that's why we saw so many, like, DV escalation in calls,
absolutely.
Because those things get exasperated. Did I say that?
Uh-huh.
When people are, like, quarantined together, people are, like, isolated from everything. Even more isolated, right? Like, from everything. And so things are, like, just, like, escalating. And so you saw a lot more people reaching out for help. Yeah. And also not only for DV, but even just reaching out for help, like, for sexual assault. Just people who have experienced trauma for the first time, like, I need to go to therapy, right? Because you're alone with your thoughts, and you're
absolutely.
Like, also probably, seeing triggering things on the news, on the media, whatever, and you start to realize that you need help, right? So we've seen a lot of people, like, reaching out.
Absolutely. And I think
more than ever now.
And I think kind of like what we've been talking about, like, that is probably also another reason why we saw more people kind of feeling comfortable calling out or speaking out about these things, because they've had a chance to process or reflect or, research, see other people do it, and feel empowered to speak out on it.
Yeah. Wow. What a conversation. I don't even know what time it is.
It's been an hour and 18 minutes. I know that.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so I think we can just leave it there. Bianca's hungry. And if it's anything you know about Bianca, she gotta eat soon. Otherwise,
she will perish. Upset.
She's like a plant. Like, she will
she'll
just like continue wilting. And she's like, guys, I'm hungry. So, but thank y'all for tuning in, and if you've made it this far, like, thank you for chatting with us. Like I said, we will be doing this again in 2 weeks, July 24th.
Hopefully with people.
Yeah, we're hoping that, like I said, the intention of this one was to kind of have more of a collaborative conversation with others. Also, we recorded it only because it was just me and Bianca. The next one, like, it does not have to be recorded if like folks like don't want to, whatever the case is. Like, we are hoping that in 2 weeks this is more of like a collaborative Zoom meeting. So we'll be posting that soon, like the RSVP link and the meeting for that. So be sure to tune into that. But thank you all. Like I said, if you have any responses, if you agree, disagree, if you want to expand on a point, please feel free to reach out to either of us. My Instagram and Twitter is @_MO_MAMI, so Mami. If you want to reach out, if you have a question, anything like that.
Same. Mine is @Bodacious Bruja, both IG and Twitter. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Also, if you want to reach out for help, like if you're watching this and you were like, oh, you know, maybe I need therapy. Like, if you were like, like, yeah, people are realizing, like, maybe you're one of those
You're like,
people.
damn.
You can reach out with the place where I work, Resilience. It's a rape crisis center. And anyone who answers the phone, you can also ask, like, if you want to speak to someone, like, that is of a certain, like, that is queer, or that's a person of color. You can also ask, and we'll connect you with somebody at our staff. But yeah, we'll link.
Yeah, we'll have a whole we'll resource
put, like, the hotline
list.
Number and everything.
Absolutely, resource list. And I think a lot of the resources that we are going to include or utilize are things that are like free or like available on like a sliding scale. Because like I said, we are in an economic recession, and like it can sometimes, if the only thing holding you back is being able to afford care, there are options out there that are free, affordable, sliding scale. So we'll definitely be sure to include those things.
But also, like, reach out to us. You have ideas, if something you want to talk about for the next event, you know what I mean? The point of this, again, like I'm a survivor, like, we've all had experiences, right? Like, we want to just kind of, like, create a knowledge production space where a grassroots knowledge production space.
I was just waiting for the word grassroots. I was just waiting for it.
No, but for real,
no,
survivors can, like, talk about things, because oftentimes, you know, we talk with our friends, we talk with our therapist, maybe, if you have one, you journal, you think about these things on your own, but then also, like, survivors are so diverse and have so many different experiences and so much. Absolutely. Everyone has something important to contribute, and so I want to hear, like, other people's ideas around community building, everything.
Yes. I don't know. Absolutely. So thank y'all for tuning in, for watching us, and we will see you
with us.
We will see you in 2 weeks.